Are you ready?
Yeah.
This is Cooking with Dave and Audie. I'm Dave.
I'm Audie.
And today we're talking about someone special. Today we want to talk about somebody that really meant a lot to us, really inspired us in many different ways. He was the first name that came up in our Get to Know Us podcast when we were talking about people that we sort of look at as mentors, whether we ever met that person or not. And that person is Anthony Bourdain, Tony Bourdain, Chef Bourdain.
That's right. It's amazing too, because when we did our podcast, I think it was, I think we shot it
2 or 3 days.
Before,
it was published 2 or 3 days before
we actually
tragic news.
Yeah. And I've seen online some people sort of baffled by the response online specifically. People saying, well, what's the big deal? It's just a celebrity television chef. And I think the purpose of this is to kind of show you at least how he influenced us specifically.
It's about nothing other than that. We just want to talk about what he meant to us. Now that he's gone, it's kind of bizarre to reflect back on how much he really changed the way we think about food and
Absolutely.
Our profession and that kind of
Absolutely.
stuff. So let's start with some of the fun things. So, world-known celebrity chef, traveled the world on television. Everybody's
right.
seen him go all across the world, do all kinds of crazy things.
I mean, his show, No Reservations, was a game changer on TV.
He was kind of known for eating weird things that most people wouldn't try, drinking the local beverages, maybe overindulging a little bit on alcohol and that kind of stuff, having a bit of a potty mouth and being a bit of a rebel, you know?
Oh, yeah, he had his drink in his hand, he had his cigarette, and he was absolutely fearless when it came to being presented food. I mean, where he's in Iceland and he's eating fermented shark, you know, and just zero fear. He's like, I'm here for the experience, let's do it.
One of the more famous stories is when he eats the lower 8 inches of a wild hog's colon in Africa that was cooked sort of medium rare.
Right.
And then being ill for the next 6 weeks. But he always said, in many interviews other than in his own show, he always said, try it. You know, most of the time you're not going to get sick, even though he has really hilarious stories of getting sick. But it's about experiencing a culture. That was his whole thing. You know, culture is very closely related to the food and the beverage of that culture, sometimes tied to it really directly. You can't experience one without the other. And that's sort of the lesson that he preached, the lesson that he taught was when you travel the world, if you want to experience culture, in order to do that, you have to experience their local traditions through food and drink.
And what I think worked so well on both that show and his other show was the idea that he was the antithesis of what you see a television chef do.
Right.
An example of that is he didn't mind getting his hands dirty. He would jump right in there. His show required parental advisory warnings because he'll have an episode where they're going to break down a pig for a boucherie, a long weekend of cooking this one whole pig. And the episode shows you Bourdain got there, dispatched the pig himself. This man was not a foo-foo. He was not a chef that needed a huge trailer and a whole entourage. He got there in the dirt and he worked with the people working with food.
Yeah, he did. Well, I mean, he's probably killed lots of animals on his show. That's one good example, a nice backyard party with a roast pig or whatever. But, you know, let's talk about how he affected us.
Right.
So some of the strongest lessons I learned, one of the lessons that I talked about culture earlier, in order to experience that culture, you have to experience his food and drink. But it's so much more than that, because as a food professional, having an interest in food, I got to see such a world of variety of ingredients from watching him travel.
Right.
So everywhere he went, there were new combinations of flavors, new ingredients, new sort of dishes and techniques that I had never seen before. It was super, super interesting. All the local sort of alcoholic beverages and beers and liquors and wines and stuff that I had never seen before, techniques that I had never seen before, were really, really fascinating to me. Beyond just it was a very entertaining show as far as casual watching, but as a professional watching it, I learned a lot of valuable lessons. Some of those things were things like, in some cases, there's not a best way of doing anything. Right? It's sort of a general application of something. So, great example is, there's no best stew that you can make. but every culture around the world has a stew dish that's embedded in that culture, because it's a dish of just taking leftovers and throwing it in a pot and making food for 4 or 5 people out of it. Seeing him travel to really poor cultures and then seeing how those cultures treated their food. You know, when you're poor, there's not a lot of food to go around. You got to make it last, so you're not wasting anything. You're utilizing every part of an animal, every part of a plant, something like that. It's a really, I mean, this person really did sort of change the way I see what I do.
Well, and specifically working in the restaurant industry, he, it would be remiss to not mention Kitchen Confidential. His book that he wrote put him on the map. I mean, that's really where he blew up.
As far as being famous, yeah.
The book's conceit is his life cooking primarily in New York City, in the 80s, in the sex, drugs, rock and roll culture.
It's just crazy stories of him growing up in the industry.
Absolutely. Yeah. But what he did was he was able to break down these sort of barriers. I remember specifically one of the stories that he said in that book was the idea that he was taught by chefs that would scoff at the idea of serving a filet mignon served below medium. And he was the first chef I heard that said, no, take this ugly piece at the end, butterfly it, cook it to well done if that's what the guest wants, and then charge him for a piece of meat you were never going to serve anyways. He understood pleasing the guest was more important than your personal ego about food.
Yeah. I liked, one of the things I remember really strongly was sort of geography lessons. When he would go to a place, he would talk about the geography of it, the sort of history of it and that kind of stuff. And one of the conclusions that he drew sort of over his years of travel was that cultures that have been conquered over and over again are the best food cultures.
The best food
because they're drawing influences from many different cultures, ingredients from many different cultures, techniques from many different cultures. So has a wider variety of food in that culture that exists today. I find that super interesting. And
in no way getting political, his unabashed love for Mexicans and Puerto Ricans in the kitchen is amazing. He'll take a Puerto Rican with a 4th grade education, and that person will run a restaurant that does $5 million annually. You know what I mean?
Well, his sort of point was that they're very hardworking people. They're very committed to their responsibilities.
That's right.
He describes line cooks, I like to remember it as sort of like mercenaries, or maybe like pirates, you know, like privateers that are just moving around from kitchen to kitchen for better pay, better position, better authority, things like that.
Well, in Kitchen Confidential, he breaks down food service employees into a few groups. The pirate was certainly one. The assassin was one as well. The assassin was a guy who worked his station, only his station.
That's right.
He's not interested in learning anything else. The best person in the restaurant to work that station, but somebody that's not overly passionate and have a lot of culinary curiosity.
So the assassin is like a grill cook that is an amazing grill cook, but can't really work the fry station, can't really work the saute station.
Has no desire.
And doesn't really want to learn how to do it very well.
Right.
And makes his money off of just being really good at the grill or whatever the other.
A great chef can compartmentalize and identify these traits in employees, put them in the best situation to succeed for themselves and the restaurant.
Those people to their strengths. Yeah, of course you would.
And go forward. Of course, most people, you can't separate his shows like No Reservation without addressing his writing. His ability to poetically describe food made the show better.
He's
almost every show that was offered.
Very eloquent with words. Yeah, he really had a knack for being able to communicate really complex ideas. Yeah, and he always had a way of just putting it sort of like a virtuoso, just putting it in just such a way that not only was it poetic, but you understand exactly what he's saying. And beyond that, you know, I knew him on TV before I read his books. And then going back and reading his books after you kind of know him on TV, you know his voice, you know his face. It's sort of as if he's reading it to you. In your head, you hear his voice as you're reading his words, you know.
Yeah. And that's the thing about his propensity to write, his ability to create incredible travel shows about food. People forget, this man was a beast in the fucking kitchen. This guy killed in the
Yeah.
kitchen. And I remember talking to my dad when we were both devastated to hear the news of his passing.
Yeah.
And I remember putting something as a way of rest in peace, Chef Bourdain kind of thing. And my dad said he might have been a better writer than a chef. And I responded by saying, that's quite a compliment to his writing, because he was an incredible chef. And I don't know that a lot of people saw him that way.
Well, he did put on TV very much him actually working in a kitchen. That's not really what he did.
Right.
He was more of a traveler, you know. I don't know anybody. I mean, you think about how far and wide he traveled. There aren't many humans in all of human history that have traveled that much, seen that much. That's an amazing thing. And he took all of us there with him along the way,
You're right.
you know. And those are places I'll never wind up going to, but at least I have a little bit of experience in their culture and their food and the way they treat each other.
He got to a point in the food culture, the international food culture as a whole, where he was able to bring his audiences to places that you physically can't go to today.
Yeah.
One of my absolute favorite episodes is the Spain episode where he goes to El Bulli and he talks about having the greatest meal of his life. It was like, what, 30 courses or something
It was
like that?
the second to last day before El Bulli closed permanently.
And Chef Adria
It's like a
knew
45-course dinner, something like that, yeah.
the chef of El Bulli. This restaurant had been considered the best restaurant in the world several years in a row. And even Chef Adria knew that Bourdain would approach this meal with respect and that his audience would get it.
Yeah.
And so we were allowed, I just got chills thinking about it, we were allowed to join and experience something no one will ever get to experience.
No, I mean, that restaurant's closed forever. Well, you and I are never going to get to experience it. We're probably never going to get to experience that chef's food, period, in any other restaurant.
So he was clearly loved by literary professionals, loved by viewers of his and fans of his shows, and respected by culinarians.
Sort of an international man of mystery in a certain way, right?
That's the fucking truth.
A man's man on top of that. Yeah, and sort of outspoken about his points of view in the world, especially about things like world hunger and that kind of stuff, access to clean water. I mean, he's very outspoken about those kinds of things.
And he also never took himself too seriously because his show had great humor. What was the guy's name, the Russian?
Zamir. Well, I was going to say my favorite episode of No Reservations is when they're in Romania. They go to Transylvania,
right?
And they're in a like Dacia car. It's like this communist-built car from the 60s, and it breaks down on this rugged road. So Zamir gets out to push the car while Tony drives. Zamir throws out his back.
Right.
They wind up at a local village where Zamir starts drinking tuika, the local distilled beverage, sort of like vodka. Gets right pissed up. Then they hand him a bunch of Vicodins, and he eats a bunch of those, and he gets even more pissed up.
Right.
And then at dinner that night, he starts doing like 15 toasts to Mother Russia and the fallen comrades and all that kind of shit. It was absolutely hilarious. Hilarious.
So good, dude. That is so good.
Even the ones where he's in the United States and he went to like Buffalo or Detroit or he's near the United States, like Toronto, Vancouver, Mexico City, that kind of absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And everywhere he went, totally respected the culture, the people, their traditions. I mean, he even went to places that were, you know, basically war zones. Like he went to Iraq. He went to Libya.
Well, if you remember, I think it wasn't it Libya or Syria where he actually got.
I think
Libya, right?
Yeah, I want to say.
Who was actually like.
He became trapped in the country as civil war erupted. Yeah.
Insane.
And then had to have like some ex-CIA kind of guy exfiltrate him sort of secretly out of the country. Not quite that clandestine, but it was weird, yeah.
Well, but the weird thing was that when that episode aired, it began as an episode about the food of Libya and the proud people of that country, and then became an insider's view to an international conflict that everybody was talking about. Everyone in the world watched that episode if you wanted to have any idea of what was going on at the ground level. I mean, his influence is immense, and it's an absolute tragedy that he's not there.
I think the whole point of this whole thing is to say how much this person really inspired us, and he really did in so many ways. I will remember those lessons forever. I will remember him forever, or at least for the rest of my life.
Right.
An extraordinary man, an absolute tragedy that he's no longer around, and that's kind of selfish saying that, you know, my life is less because this person is no longer here to inspire me. But, you know, the old saying, heroes get remembered, but legends never die.
Yeah.
He's a legend. So, I mean, he's going to be a popular name for decades and generations to come.
Yeah, he was such a unique voice. There's nobody like Bourdain before Bourdain. There won't ever be anybody like Anthony Bourdain after him. The world lost an actual great voice in the culinary world.
Right.
And we wanted to take the moment just to let you know that he meant a lot to us personally. And we'd love it if you would comment in the comment section if he had any sort of specific relationship, or let us know what was your favorite episode, what was your favorite book, what's your favorite recipe out of one of his cookbooks, that kind of thing. That way we can make sure that we're honoring and celebrating his life.
Right. I always kind of thought, sort of in the back of my mind, that, you know, when he retired, I could take over his job.
Right.
But Travel Channel hasn't called me yet, CNN hasn't called me yet.
Yeah.
My phone number is